is that thanks to Nick Bosa, DeMeco Ryans wins the NFL Assistant Coach of the Year award. Well deserved for DeMeco. This is at the NFL Honors Awards ceremony that's being held at the Super Bowl. And DeMeco beat out the Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen and the Lions OC Ben Johnson. And man, DeMeco had an incredible year. Niners defense was ranked in the top 5 in almost every single category. And obviously, DeMeco's now moving on. He's the head coach of the Houston Texans. What players, what coaches does he take with him? That's one of the themes of the offseason. What do you think? I mean, now that we've had a couple days to, digest everything with DeMeco out and Steve Wilks in, what's your thought on what the 49ers are losing and gaining?
Yeah, and I think this is kind of hard for me to completely talk about, not because the topic has any difficulty, just because I don't want to sound like I'm discrediting DeMeco Ryans, because I really did think he did a great job. I think he's well deserved of the award. He just won Assistant Coach of the Year, and he's also well deserving of the Texans head coaching job. But I don't think the Niners are losing that much, and it's because the philosophy and culture of this defense remains. And I keep saying, Larry, I think this is the 4th or 5th time you've heard me say it, Baltimore Ravens-esque, right? It's built around Bosa and Warner. The philosophy is the same. They're going to be, in their base, that 4-3 front, and they're going to, play the same fronts that they usually play, be a one-gap team, do what they do. And they're going to play quarters. They're going to play cover 3, but they're going to rush the passer and play zone behind it. That's what they want to do. And that's where I think if you find very talented players, which the 49ers have, you find a coordinator who's a good communicator, which Steve Wilks is, as well as DeMeco Ryans was, then it's just about, you have your base defense, you know what you're going to do. It's about finding your creativity on third down. And Robert Saleh really found his creativity in 2019 and 2020. DeMeco Ryans was exceptionally creative, adding all those little creepers and sim pressures and all those little things they did, from the double mug looks and then all the stunts and all the things they did up front. DeMeco Ryans was very, very creative there. And then he added in more looks of man coverage to this defense. And ultimately, I think Steve Wilks' sprinkle is going to be even more man coverage. He plays a lot more single high. They played a lot more single high in Carolina. Now, I do think that was a product of Carolina having some very good corners, right? J.C. Horn's a hell of a player. But I think ultimately the Niners are going to look to bring Emmanuel Mosley back, and we're going to see them play a little bit more man coverage, and that's going to be Steve Wilks' wrinkle. But again, not to discredit DeMeco Ryans, but the more I digest it, I don't think the Niners are going to miss him that much at all.
I mean, the one thing about DeMeco is the guys really did have a great love and respect for him, and they played with their hair on fire. And I think they really believed in DeMeco, especially the linebackers,
right?
Maybe because he was a linebacker. But just talking to Dre Greenlaw and, Aziz and some of these guys about DeMeco and just the respect that they have for him as a coach. I do think, though, Wilks, checks a lot of boxes. He's got experience. It's not his first rodeo. He can totally take over that side of the football. They want, they need to they got some young DBs and they need to draft some young DBs, and he's a former DB himself. And I think that will help the secondary. I think the pass defense is the area that needs improving the most. And I think obviously Wilks is a big part of that. And then you don't have to switch your scheme. It's a one gap penetrating 4-3 thing, 4-3 front, and then you've got obviously the D-line coach Kosaric staying on, doing his wide 9. So that kind of jives. I think it all kind of works together. Here's one thing though. And then I want to know if this concerns you. I think Steve Wilks, clearly you see him speak in a room full of Panther players. He has a presence. He's from what I've heard from Brian Burns, who Jordan Elliott had a great cut from Brian Burns from the Pro Bowl, saying that, he cares about his players as people, not just as football players. To me, that's vital. I know that sounds hokey and, high school hairy-ish, but if the guys don't think that you're about them, not like them, the football player, then I think you lose a little bit, and you got to be about your guys. And I think Steve is. I think that's a real strength of his. Here's the concern. if you look at where his defense is ranked recently, 19th, 20th, 26th, and 11th. He's never had an NFL defense in the top 10, let alone the top 5. Also, he's moved a lot. He's had 6 different moves in the NFL in 6 years. He said he had 7 moves in 7 years in the NC2A, which might be actually a good thing because that means if he gets another head coaching job in a year, they get 2 more third-round compensatory picks. There's that. But how more about the defensive rankings? 19, 20, 26, and 11.
Weren't the 2015 Carolina Panthers top 5?
I guess not. They I know this, they went to the Super Bowl and they blitzed a lot. They blitzed 44% of the time that year, but they must have been 11th. They must have been not quite top 10.
That's shocking to me. I remember.
I read that this week: 19th, 20th, 26th, and 11th. So is that a concern that he hasn't had super high ranking defenses? I mean, it's always hard because you got to go back. I mean, I'm asking you to kind of evaluate players that you don't even know were on those defenses. You know, how much is it the players versus the coordinator? It's almost impossible. But those aren't great rankings.
Oh, okay. McDermott, he only took over in 2017. That's my fault. I forgot McDermott was the coordinator before him. That's what it was. Yeah, you're right. The rankings aren't exactly ideal, and it's not like Carolina has been completely bereft of talent, right? There's a few good players on that defense. Shaq Thompson is quite good. Jeremy Chin is a nice player. Brian Burns is a fantastic player. Derek Brown, I know you love Derek Brown. Larry Krueger loves Derek Brown. We know that. I'm sure this offseason we'll talk a little bit more about trading for Derek Brown, as we always do. But I'm not exactly too concerned because I think situationally this is a little bit different. I think that instead of completely implementing and teaching and doing what Steve Wilks does, Steve Wilks is going to be learning about what the 49ers do and then adding what Steve Wilks does. And then I think he's going to be taking over. You know, they had talent on those defenses, but that talent is nothing near this. And I just feel like, Larry, again, I keep going back to the word culture. I think they've implemented this culture. They've cultivated it where they play defense a certain type of way in San Francisco, and they play this style and philosophy. And just like Hendricks says, it comes down to the players, and it's built around those two, to me, future Hall of Fame players in Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. And those guys set the tone, and they play the same way, and they play really fast, and they play how they play defense, and they really fast and really physical. And so ultimately, Larry, I don't think there's as much pressure on the coordinators. What I'm trying to say, it's not that Saleh wasn't fantastic. He really was. DeMeco was fantastic as well. Maybe Steve Wilks is fantastic. Maybe he isn't. But I think this defense, you know, even when you just play simple stuff and whatever and just do run-of-the-mill stuff, it's so talented that they really can be, you know, top 10, top 5. I mean, remember them in 2020 with all those injuries? I mean, Robert Saleh was in peak creativity, but
you know, the one, you know, by the way, the Panthers this year with Wilks as the defensive coordinator finished 25th in defensive DVOA. Now, it's obviously more about the players. He took over for Matt Rule after Rule was fired, and then after Rule was fired, 4 of Carolina's best 5 single season scores came with Wilks in charge of the team. So he did have some success this year.
Can I add one thing to this though?
Sure, absolutely.
I think the other thing is just the offense, right? Carolina has had no semblance of offense when he's had to conduct the defense there. Arizona had Josh Rosen. Obviously, you know, the game is complementary. If you're putting your defense in a lot of shitty spots because your quarterback keeps turning it over, which the Panthers have had that problem, whether it was Sam Darnold, Teddy Two Gloves turned it over a little bit there as well. Cam Newton, you know, post MVP really fell off. His body really gave out on him. And so ultimately, I also think it's not just, I don't think their defenses were ultimately as bad as their rankings. Some of it is just the complementary element of their offense was really bad. They turned it over a lot. They didn't have any way of scoring, so the defense might have had to be a little more aggressive and stuff like that.
We are 17 minutes into this live stream. I'm Larry Krueger, of course, Vish Kumar, and with us. We do this twice a week, Tuesdays on Vish's channel, Thursdays now on the
Yeah, it's
Krug
become a
Show
thing.
channel. And we appreciate everybody joining us. And